Hi there, welcome to my presentation on how to create and use RSA animate style videos in your classroom as a new approach to learning. The great American writer William Soroyan once said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And much of my arguments in regards to this presentation on why RSA Animate is a useful tool is surrounded by this quote that words alone aren't enough in 21st century classrooms to get students to have deep understanding of content and material. Also, Aristotle once said too that there can be no words without images. And again, this speaks volumes to what I want to talk about and present in regards to the fact that we live in a world where students need more than just text to have meaningful learning experiences. So let's start from the beginning. For those of you that aren't familiar, what is RSA Animate? Well, first of all, RSA actually stands for Royal Society for the Enlightenment and Engagement of Arts, Commerce, and Manufacturing. And their catchphrase on their website is 21st Century Enlightenment. And they're an organization, a not-for-profit organization, committed to finding practical, innovative solutions to things. If you look at their website, they're more than just animate videos. The RSA Animate section is one neat 21st century media that they use to promote some of the things that they believe are innovative and enlightened practices. However, if you've never seen one of these RSA Animate videos before, let me show you one quickly. The IBO has made one for the IBO North America website. So let's have a look at their example.
IB education isn't a recent fad or passing trend. Over 40 years ago, we pioneered an approach to learning that, to this day, inspires students, teachers, and communities. The International Baccalaureate is international education. Students achieve at the highest levels and create a better world for everyone along the way. We're different from other academic programs. Our approach isn't simplistic. Students grow to become lifelong learners because of our holistic learner profile. The profile underpins our 4 rigorous programs. Spanning from pre-kindergarten through to high school, the IB develops the capacities of students in keeping with the learner profile, so students become critical thinkers, risk-takers, influencers, and innovators. An IB education engages students in their own learning, leaving them ready, motivated, and prepared for college and career. Be part of the IB and connect to the world. www.ibo.org.
So if we look at and break down what makes up a RSA Animate style video, there are several things that make them such a powerful media or so engaging to the reader. One is it's thinking made visual. In other words, the images and the pictures help tell a really strong story which keeps you interested and engaged in the material that you're watching and listening. Further to that, for those that have to make up an RSA Animate, the challenge is that you have to be able to synthesize large amounts of information into a very simplistic format and decide what minimalistic pictures might you use along with smatterings of text here and there. In essence, what you're doing is you're storytelling. If you think back to when you were a child and you read books like The Three Little Pigs, I still, to this day, in my 40s, remember the story of The Three Little Pigs because of this rich way that information is synthesized with pictures to help sort of ingrain and cement and stamp into my mind important information. So in essence, RSA Animate uses three factors and they use them in concert with each other. There's text, stories, and then a voiceover helping tell the story or the pictures. If you follow social media or read a lot of websites, there's a growing trend nowadays in regards to infographics. And research surrounding why RSA Animate is such a powerful tool is huge right now. For example, we live in an era now with the internet and social media where students are constantly being faced with more and more visual information. Literature, since 1990, there's 400% more visual information in the literature that we're reading. Internet websites have a huge increase in the amount of video and pictures on all the websites that we read, and even newspapers have jumped on this bandwagon in regards to the amount of visual and video and visuals. Well, why is this? Well, if we look at textbooks that give us an understanding of human anatomy, 50% or almost 50% of your brain is used for visual processing. And if we look at our eyes, 70% of our eyes are sensory receptors. And if we look at the speed at which we can analyze a visual scene, our brain is also very hardwired for that. It takes us less than 0.01 seconds for us to visually make sense of and analyze a scene as we walk into the room. Furthermore, we are overloaded with information, and we're learning to adapt and change how we process that overloaded information. We receive 5 times as much information today than when we did in 1986. We receive 34 gigabytes, or approximately 100,000 amounts of information outside of our work every day. And on average, users only read 28% of the words that they visit when we go to websites. So we're coping and adapting by becoming scanners. We're scanning for something interesting, and that usually means it's a picture or a video associated with text. And again, to be truthful, to cut to the chase, to give you the bottom line, I think it's hard to disagree with this statement that visual information is just more engaging, it's more pleasing. And further to that, one research study done by in 1986 by a company found that color visuals increase the willingness of someone to read something by 80%. More research to talk about in regards to visual information. A study published in the journal Patient Education and Counseling found that when a medicine bottle had text and pictures, there was a 95% rate of understanding of what was on that medicine bottle. However, in the study, they found that if it was just text-related information without visuals or pictures, there was only a 70% rate of understanding of what the labels were trying to say. So in other words, visuals, pictures really help in developing an understanding of something. And that speaks volumes to this slide. In this slide, a study done in 1982 in the Journal of Education, Communication, and Technology, it was found that people followed directions much better when there was text and illustrations used compared to if texts were used alone. Further information and support to visual information. A study done by the Wharton School of Business found that the audience was much more convinced when they listened to a presentation that had both text and visuals, as opposed to if someone purely verbally presented. And my final, or not my final, but and one more thing, we all remember something similar to this, but there's the old adage that we remember 10% of what we hear, 20% of what we read, and 80% of what we see and do. So my inspiration in regards to how I got interested and involved in working with RSA Animate with my students and then later on with my staff had to do with a unit that I was on in regards to geology. We were studying in grade 7 science, rocks and minerals, and traditionally over many years, I know this was a little bit harder unit for students because rocks are inanimate objects. Rocks don't move around. When we poke them, they don't do a lot. In other words, it was a low interest unit and topic, and I wanted students to become engaged in the material. And often we find technology can act as a tool to help us do that. And so in my first section on getting students to understand the rock cycle and the different types of rocks, I wanted to find a new way to approach it. And so I did an internet research. I had watched and was entertained by many of the RSA Animate videos. And so I found this teacher out of the United States. His name is Paul Blogush. Paul Blogush had a blog posting whereby he had already tried out this new media in his classroom and gave very detailed instructions on how this might be done. And Paul's motivation was very similar to mine. In his blog posting, Paul talks about how students were having a hard time understanding the historical events around the Louisiana Purchase. And so what he decided to do was he wanted them to get more engaged and obviously a deeper understanding of this. And so he, like me, had heard of RSA Animate and decided to give it a go with his class. And so again, it shows you the power of technology as just a tool. The real sort of thing, or the real goal here, was deeper understanding. The tool in this case is RSA Animate. Most IB schools have a program that they have in place where they map out a scope and sequence, both horizontal within your grades and then vertical from grade to grade, in regards to the learning skills and strategies we want students to have from year to year. So these might be organizational skills, note-taking strategies, and so our school, like many IB schools, have that. Our school in grades 7, 8, and 9 focus on how students can use Cornell notes to help them in taking notes in class and then using those Cornell notes to help prepare and study for quizzes and tests. And so Cornell notes, if you're not familiar, they look something like this. On the left side are key points and questions. On the right side are notes about these key points. And then below or underneath is a summary or a synthesis to simplify what above was said and done.